The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or beliefs of Marshall University, Marshall University Libraries, the Department of English, the College of Liberal Arts, Marshall University Film Studies, or HerdCon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of HerdCon Book Chats. I am Cody Lumpkin, and with me always from the Marshall Drinko Library is Megan Sexton Harness. How are you doing, Megan?
Doing pretty good. Happy it's finals week.
Yes, it's finals week. So keep in mind, as of this recording, this will be finals week, so we may be the brains are there, but the ability to get from the brain to the mouth may be a little garbled. We will do our best. We've survived many finals weeks amongst us, 100 years altogether. So
Yes.
but we'll get through it. Of course, we have like 2 or 3 finals a year, so not a big deal. We have several guests today. We're going to be discussing Sarah Orne Jewett's The Country of the Pointed Firs. And this is a book that's in the public domain, so there are multiple editions you can find. To just do a little biography first of Sarah Orne Jewett, then I'll introduce our guests who are very knowledgeable in the book. Sarah, is it Orne?
Orne.
Orne.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sarah Orne Jewett was a Maine-born writer best known for her finely observed fiction of rural New England life, largely self-educated. She began publishing stories in her teens and broke through with Deep Haven from 1877, a sketch collection that established her signature regionalist mode. She became a regular contributor to the Atlantic Monthly and moved to the highest literary circles of her day, forming a close and sustaining friendship, in quotations, likely a Boston marriage, with the writer and editor Anne Fields, with whom she spent much of her adult life. The Country of the Pointed Firs from 1897 is considered her masterpiece and was championed by Willa Cather, noted Nebraska author, as one of the greatest American prose works. A carriage accident in 1902 effectively ended her writing career, and she died in 1909 in South Berwick, Maine, in the South Berwick, Maine house where she was born. Though her reputation faded for much of the 20th century, feminist scholarship from the 1980s onward restored her to her rightful place among American literary icons such as Twain and Warton. And with us today to discuss that book, we have Dr. Jana Tigelaar. Dr. Tigelaar is an associate professor as well as the department chair of English at Marshall University. So she's technically my boss. She is my boss, and she's a wonderful boss. She's my favorite boss. Where she teaches classes in early and 19th century American literature, women's writing, literary regionalism, and Gothic literature. Her current book project, Among Neighbors, Women's Regionalist Literature and the Project of Neighborliness, examines the neighborly relationship through which regionalist writers propose alternative modes of national identity and belonging. Her work has appeared most recently in Legacy, the Edith Wharton Review, College English, and the edited collection New Perspectives on Mary E. Wilkins Freeman, Reading With and Against the Grain. And with her today is one of our English majors, Harper Olick. Currently, she's one of our English majors at the time of this recording, but afterwards she will have graduated. She's graduating in May 2026 with a double major in creative writing and lit studies. She is currently the editor of Etc., Marshall's literary student magazine, and has played several roles in the Marshall School of Theater Productions, including Wolves, When We Were Young and Unafraid, and Much Ado About Nothing. This fall, she will be attending George Mason University to earn an MFA in creative writing. And I'd like to also just say that, Harper, we wish you the absolute best.
Thank you.
People like you in the English department. We're sad to see you go, but we understand why, and we wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
And I'll add, too, that Harper was just awarded the Best Overall English Major Award at the Honors Convocation last week. So much celebrated in the department as well.
And so I think one of the things that I remember you all had, you're obviously, this is your era. This is your area,
And
Jana.
era. That's right.
Era
I'm from the
and
past.
area.
Yes.
And Harper, you had recently presented a paper not too long ago on the country of the pointed firs. So I wanted to kind of kick things off with if y'all could give us some little input and thoughts about what's known as American regionalism and that time period and how it relates to somebody like Sarah Warren Jewett and the country of the pointed firs.
I could start off by talking about the class out of which this project grew, and kind of how we came to present on a panel together that this paper came from. That might be helpful. So Harper was in my English 423 American Lit 1865 to 1914 class in spring of 23.
Yes.
Yes. 4?
Yeah,
3?
24.
4. Yeah.
The years flow
Yes,
together.
I know they truly do. And I'm always excited when students in my classes like my favorite books and readings in the class. And I'm a regionalist girly and have been since I kind of hit on that as my research area when I was a grad student. So I was really thrilled to be able to teach for the first time this class in my time period, in my era. And area. And when I got to the regionalist unit, not only did we have an introductory lesson where we read some shorter works by regionalist authors, but then we read The Country of the Pointed Firs in its entirety. And when Harper chose to write, I think, multiple papers.
I think read 5 novels in that class,
Yeah.
and we could write any of our projects on any of
Anything.
the novels,
Mhm.
and I think I wrote 5 out of 6 assignments on Pointed Firs.
Yes, which was totally fine with me. And I was just like, evilly rubbing my hands together and plotting. And I think the next step that we took was I encouraged Harper to apply for one of the undergraduate creative discovery and scholarship awards. And I was thrilled when she received that award. And then that next fall, we worked together on her expanding that paper into a conference. Well, not even really expanding, but reworking that paper into a conference presentation, which fortunately another regionalist scholar that I know reached out about putting a panel together for the Society for the Study of American Women Writers Conference, which was held in November of 2025 in Philadelphia. So it really all came together quite well. Harper's focus, which was on labor, and I'll let you talk more about that, in the country of the pointed firs, just fit in quite nicely with the panel as a whole. But to rewind to the original question that you had, which was about like what is regionalism. So the way that I introduce it in that class is it kind of in conversation with these other post-World War II genres that emerged, right? So not World War II, sorry, pre-World,
War.
yes, post-Civil War. I've been watching World War II dramas, and so my mind is in a different place. So post-Civil War genres that emerged prior to the Civil War, you had a lot of what Hawthorne called the romance, which is sort of kind of novels, but with an element of like sentimental, supernatural elements to them. And he would not have been happy about me calling them a novel, though, because novels were for women and lower class people to read. So after the kind of earth-shattering atrocities of the Civil War, we see the emergence of kind of new genres that were seen as ways to kind of, I guess, encounter the new reality that people were living with. And so realism was sort of the first one to emerge. And then people think of naturalism, literary naturalism, and regionalism as kind of offshoots from literary realism. And frequently, regionalism is seen as sort of like a minor genre out of that emerged out of realism, or a development of an earlier genre known as local color fiction, which was kind of comic and sort of like making fun of like bumpkins and these sort of like country characters, which of course, the earliest Appalachian and kind of Southern fiction portrayed the residents of this region in that kind of local color way. So my own when I teach regionalism, we talk about the sort of like genre characteristics that it shares with realism and naturalism. So an approach to the world as it is, a portrayal of like real language and dialect and dialogue, the way that actual people speak and interact with each other. Realistic scenes and settings. You talked about like what happens in the book. Nothing much happens in the book, right? It's sort of like everyday life, which is a characteristic of regional literature as well. And just a real intensive focus for regionalism on like local places and customs and people who are part of this particular area. And then your focus with this particular book, The Country of the Pointed Firs, I think dove a little deeper into regionalism.
Yeah, so a lot of the sort of research that I've done with Pointed Firs and with specifically women's regionalism, with writers like Sarah Orton Jewett, Mary Wilkins Freeman, I focus a lot on the sort of economic labor aspects of these stories, because something that I think is really interesting about regionalism, about these like slice of life, often rural stories, these like agrarian communities, is that it sort of gives us an alternate version to the sort of grander economic state of like 19th century America in this case, where we sort of get to see these communities that like sort of during like industrialization, like everything post-Civil War, are still sort of hanging on to a lot of these more rural ways of living, rural ways of working, community-based working. But yeah, it's finals week.
Your brain-mouth connection is strong. You're doing great.
I'm
so
here.
yeah.
I'm there. But a lot of the times they sort of present these more like non-normative labor cultures or even just social cultures. And I think Pointed Firs in specific, we have this narrator from the city, coming in from the city out of town. So it is very much a local color thing of, an outsider comes in, sort of experiences the way of life of these people. I think the first couple chapters are so funny. When she comes in, she's here for like a writing retreat situation so she can catch up on work because she's got this like very isolating, solitary writing job in the city. She's like, I'll take a vacation, go to the countryside. And when she's there, she's like, these people won't stop talking to me. Like, I can't get away to work. They want me to, she's helping Mrs. Todd with her sort of pharmacy business she's got going on. But yeah, I think, I every time I talk about this book, I'm like, nothing actually happens in it. There's not a whole lot of plot, but it's just this really wonderful slice of life that I think it just depicts a really like it's a very like lovely. Every time I read it, I get really nostalgic, even though I was not alive during that time. But it's just this like really lovely, calming sort of. It feels very pre-industrial, and it feels. Dunnett's Landing is a place that you can slow down, that you can work with your community members. But, yeah.
What were your thoughts, Megan? You're coming. This is a first-time reader.
Yeah, I had never read this before, and I surprisingly liked it. There are many books that I read where I'm like, why is the plot getting in the way of the story? And so I didn't know where it was going, but I was relieved that plot never interrupted my enjoyment.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Because there's been several books where I'm like, I just want to know what you're doing day to day. So
you will get that with regional literature. Yeah, often to like the tiniest detail.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, but it also made me question what I thought I knew or the understanding I had about the period. I don't know if I just missed something, but I didn't even realize that the narrator was a woman until, at least in my copy, 80 pages in. I was like, wait a minute, this is a woman? And so I was very shocked by the amount of freedom, I guess, that women are shown to have and like this economic because I was like, oh, women didn't really work until World War II. So getting this view of like, no, women were working. I don't know if it's because it was a more rural space, less worried about being uppity or what it was. But yeah, it definitely challenged a lot of the thoughts I had about the late 1800s.
I think that speaks to something that Harper said as well, like thinking of regionalism as women's regionalism. Part of the reality of the New England communities that Jewett writes about and other New England regionalists like Wilkins Freeman, who is another one that I really focus on, write about. In this time period is that the many of the men had gone off and were killed during the Civil War. And then with the economic realities, with the Industrial Revolution, and kind of the rise of like train transportation, you have the young men leaving the rural communities, going abroad. Freeman has a famous short story called A New England Nun, where a woman has been engaged for many years because her fiance left to go to the minefields of Australia to make his fortune, right? So people needing to leave New England in order to make enough money to live. But the people who are leaving are the men. And that means that who is left behind is often the women, and women of all ages and all stations and all sort of abilities. And then the men who are left behind are often older men, so widowers like we see in the novel. And sort of men who are not attached to families in a traditional way, right? So we have, I think, women's regionalism. It's sort of a catch-22. It is written by women, often featuring women because the communities that they are writing about are largely female-centered. But then, as a result, regionalism kind of got painted into a corner as a women's genre and therefore sort of diminished because of that. But of course, then that also has to do with another thing that Harper mentioned, which is economy and labor and capitalism. And I think that's an undercurrent, even though not much happens, right? There's an undercurrent of that happening throughout this very short book. Our narrator, who, yes, is a woman who has enough freedom and flexibility in her life to be able to travel from Boston, likely the city that she's, the literary city she's traveling from, up to Maine, to write her articles, likely for a literary magazine like Atlantic Monthly, over the summer. But also Mrs. Todd with her kind of garden and her pharmacy practice. These sort of like cottage industries that we see in these communities. That there are these different economies of scale happening. Yeah.
I was also I had read this book in college in a American naturalism and realism class. And I remember loving it. And then I forgot so much about it. But I still loved it. And I think one of the things I recall that it was with a professor named Dr. Deborah McComber. She was our teacher. And this was my favorite book. I wrote like 2 papers on this book from that class.
It'll get you.
We didn't have as many papers. There was back in the days, you didn't do response writing. You just, wrote papers and a couple of responses. And the thing that I think got hammered home was that this was, you could see done at Landing, and the story, it takes place in not only what we would see as like a matriarchal society, but women's spaces. There's this rather confirmed kind of an oddball. There's the William, he's the brother of Mrs. Todd, and he seems the narrator is very kind of, I guess she humors him, and he goes to show this little, like, look at this lovely view I have here. And it's like, this is like such a guy view of things, and then you've got Mrs. Todd, and she's going in to find the herbs and the pennyroyal. The pennyroyal is everywhere. And these little kind of private personal spaces that they have. And some of the best writing in the book is in those simple kind of descriptions of those areas and things like that. And it's those things like, I was like, feel like glad that I happened to be an English major at the time where these kind of works were getting more critical assessment. Yeah. So we read like Red Badge of Courage and something like that. But we also read, The
Yeah.
Country of the Pointed Firs.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, what are, I guess, areas, parts that you all found particularly affecting, interesting, worth revisiting for the readers?
My favorite part of this entire book is what I like to call the chowder chapters.
Yeah.
It's the section where Mrs. Todd and our narrator, who is unnamed, goes to visit Mrs. Todd's mother, Mrs. Blackett, on Green Island. William is also that's the first time that we get to
Yeah.
meet William. And that was a big section that I focused on in my writings about labor because I think that is one of the best examples of how community labor works in the book. Because in Dunnett's Landing, like part of the thing that I think is so beautiful about it is that unlike the sort of work that the narrator is used to, where it's very solitary wage labor, you're just doing it to get by, labor in Dunnett's Landing in this like agrarian community is sort of an act, like the title of my paper is Labor of Love. It is an act of love. It's an act of bonding. And so over the course of 4 chapters, they make a chowder. That's the only thing that happens in 4 chapters. This book is awesome. And it is a community effort. William catches the fish. They get the fish from his trawl. Mrs. Todd brings like onion and stuff from her garden. William and the narrator go dig potatoes together from Mrs. Blackett's garden. Mrs. Blackett's the one that's actually cooking it. And that is specifically the potato gathering scene with William and the narrator is like a huge sort of bonding moment where William is kind of like a strange, like slightly antisocial guy. Trying to find the quote. He's specifically characterized as, quote, odd about seeing folks. Quote.
Same.
Yeah. William is very relatable. But, as soon as the narrator and William start digging these potatoes together, which are also described as, it's like very like, it's like, mining gold. Like this is like the greatest, best thing you could be doing. They like immediately have this like bond. He's helping her to carry the potatoes. They have like this immediate friendship through this act of communal labor. And it's the same thing with Mrs. Todd and the narrator is that their entire, like they have this very close bond that the entire thing comes from doing work together. She's helping her out with, her pharmacy, with her pharmacopoeia, I think is how you say it, her medicinal stuff. She, there's the pennyroyal field scene where they go to gather the pennyroyal, and Mrs. Todd sort of gives her a whole lot of information that she says, like, oh, this is stuff about my past that, like, I've never told anybody but my mother. And there are just so many moments of just really lovely bonding moments where the backdrop is specifically acts of labor. So, yeah.
And in a natural environment, which I think
Yes.
is really important for Jewett to portray as well. Yeah. And I also love the chowder making scenes. I can't help but contrast it to like the quick videos that we have now of like, here's how to make a 20-minute meal. And I'm like, how about we take all day to dig 3 potatoes and make a meal that way? For me, the parts of the book that really catch my attention and that I focus on for my book project that I'm working on are the parts that are about like community and neighborliness and kind of non-normative kin formation. So then because I have a chapter that is about, since it's a book about neighbors and neighborliness, I will also have a chapter that's about people with no neighbors, so hermits. And so the character of Joanna and the idea of poor Joanna is really interesting to me. This jilted woman who exiles herself to Shell Heap Island and becomes like this lore, and they go to visit her as well, right? So in my mind, this chapter that I hope to work on this summer, I'm thinking in contrast to and conversation with the Bowdoin reunion chapter, which is this this is probably the chapter of the book that is the most written about and studied because it's seen as a sort of stand-in or a metaphor for the kind of growing nationalism that we had. So this is 1896 that the book was published. This is fully after the failure of Reconstruction. We're starting to really see the rise of like the lost cause narrative and push for reunification and reunion narratives between North and South. And so there are some critics who suggest that Jewett, in staging this sort of reunion scene, is suggesting that it's time to set aside our differences and reunify. And I'm certainly not saying that Jewett has like an attitude toward race that is any more enlightened than another person of her time period, because she doesn't. And there are additional Dunnet Landing stories, including one called The Foreigner, that I think kind of explored those ideas more, that are worth looking into. But I don't necessarily read it that way. I think that I think that Jewett's really careful throughout this book to make it clear that it's through individual encounters and working alongside people and speaking with them and seeing them as people, even when you're like, this sea captain is knitting, that's strange, or like this man who doesn't like seeing people, this adult man that I'm digging potatoes with, that seems a little queer, might be a word that they would use. And yes, there's maybe some symbolic weight to that, right? But I think that for Jewett, that is how we build that kind of kinship with people that we may not be related to. And so our unnamed narrator, who's doing the work of writing, who's building the story, who's telling the story, I think of as kind of a stand-in for us, for the reader. Yeah.
I mean, she has that immersive quality where as she is seduced, as the narrator is seduced by the place, we're obviously taken in by the place as well. And we have those feelings. And I guess it's kind of the classic kind of, people have a stereotype about a place, and then they go actually meet the people, and they say, "Oh, there's some more nuance to these folks." And
it's not all Hatfields and McCoys and hills and hollers and
I certainly feel we are recording this from West Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia, and I often have always felt there's a lot of parallels between Maine and West Virginia with the logging industry, and obviously this nostalgia for past times, and that both of these states have had a huge amount of corporate exploitation and government neglect. I should.
You mentioned the rise of nationalism. There was a quote that I put down because I thought that it was very in time for what we're living now and how wild it is that it's been 130 years and it's still timely. But the quote was, "The worst have got to be the best and rule everything. We're all turned upside down and going back year by year." And like I got to that part and I had to stop my audiobook. I was like, what? So yeah, it seems like we are still being haunted by the past.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But on a brighter end, the thing that I liked, I think most was Elijah, the old widower at the end. I was just so touched that instead of assuming that his wife had lied throughout their entire relationship, he was like, she just couldn't admit she broke the cup. That's the only thing I didn't like. Something about that just warmed my heart so much.
Yeah.
And like, I could just see him being a cat guy.
Yeah. There is an innocence to her characters, which I really appreciate. And not in like a naive kind of way, but just in a way where they have sort of uncomplicated, simple and straightforward views of the world around them. Yeah. And I think that that's where the kind of rural mindset comes in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was thinking like what type of Maine. I feel like there's three Maines in. There's the Stephen King Maine that's a little more inland. You've got the wilderness, lumberjack, hermits in the woods, in the mountains, and then you've got the like Murder, She Wrote, Jessica Fletcher, Maine, which is more like these are the ancestors of the Murder, She Wrote town, Cabot Cove or something like that. I was, I find it very interesting that this is a book about women and community in their lives. And we do have a fair amount of time given over to guys and their rambling stories, most typified by Captain Littlepage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who I mean, the narrative. I always find it really funny when I look at older works. How funny, and not like laugh out loud, but just like the snark and the sarcasm that's like there. That she's listening to this guy's story. He just shows up. She gets to the point. She's staying. She's a lodger for Mrs. Todd. She's too busy, so she rents out the schoolhouse to get away from people. And then there's this captain that shows up and he wants to tell his stories to her. And she's kind of bored by them initially until he gets into the crazy stories about the Northland and these fog people. And it feels like cosmic horror, eldritch horror at that point. Like something you wouldn't be surprised if you saw that out of like H.P. Lovecraft or something like that. But it seemed like a clear kind of commentary on like seafaring stories, and that there's a kind of absurdity. It almost feels like a parody of those kind of, not like Melville, but those kind of seafaring type of adventures.
Yeah. I think about that those chapters in a couple of different ways with Captain Littlepage. For one, this is just the way that people would have passed the time, right? Sitting around and listening to these old
And they tell
tales.
stories,
Yeah. And I think the idea of the narrator as a stand-in for us, like meeting these characters and then learning their tales, everyone likes a good ghost story, good haunting tale, right? So I think that's part of it there too. I think it's also, again, a demonstration that just because this is a regional story, it's not just this region, right? Like this is a demonstration of the way the people of Dunnet Landing and coastal Maine and these areas are really kind of caught up in these sort of like circuits of exchange and have been in different parts of the world and met all different kinds of people and had all of these different types of encounters. And so I think that Jewett, with including this character and including, I was going to say inserting, but that seemed a little bit too, including this story is kind of reminding us that this is maybe a rural place, an isolated place, but it's a place that we can get to and that they can get from. It's not all alone, It's not the moon. Yeah.
And it's there was the other lodger. I can't remember, is Miss Fiodat or I can't remember. Fostad.
Yeah. Yes. I'm looking at my cheat sheet here, my notes. Yeah.
Forget that one. But, and yeah, she was a seafaring. She was a seafaring lady and talked about her adventures, and that it does feel like it does feel like a town that had its heyday and now it's in decline.
Yeah.
And those things are kind of lingering. It's a lot of the points that y'all had brought up. And it leaves itself a lot for, I guess it's a town in reflection so much. I was also thinking, it suddenly reminded me of the line when I guess Mrs. Blackett shows back up, and there's like, I think at one point she said, what we would have been, if we weren't here today, we would just talk about the time that you visited our island and we would hang out and we just talk about that. So there's already this like meta chatting about chatting with people. Remember that time we talked? Remember that time we talked with that one person? So there are like these strange meta levels of conversation and narrative.
Well, and also this kind of sense of the sort of cyclical nature of time, right? This idea of time as unchanging in its circularity, which is interesting. Quite a few critics talk about like the non-reproductive nature of this community, right? Yeah. If it's all women and like really old men, there's not a lot of children and babies being born in this community. But of course, there are things and ideas and stories being produced.
Yeah, I think also like the sort of like constant like cyclical story of reflection sort of thing, like that's another thing that makes this feel so similar to like West Virginia or like Appalachian story, where it's like that is just very much of these sort of places. There's a lot of reminiscing, and there's a really, really interesting article. I wish I had it pulled up about specifically Captain Littlepage as a remnant figure, about how, you know, he's telling these ghost stories, but he himself is sort of almost kind of like a living ghost of the past himself. And, you know, like in this like non-reproductive place, and in this place that is sort of being, like, for lack of a better term, like left behind because of industrialization, because, you know, their resources, you know, are getting gutted by like the timber industry and stuff like that. You know, it is very much a place that has to rely on like looking back. I don't know, rely is like weird because I feel like that's a very negative look at that, but like that was another paper I wrote for Dr. Tate's class, was about like the future of Dunnett's Landing, because they're really like there's not really kids in the book. There's pretty much everybody we meet is like a widow, was widowed before they had kids, or it's, you know, everyone's grown up. You know, it's Captain Littlepage, like he's not having kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what sort of is the reason that they, you know, sort of keep going? Like, what is the reason that they are living like this very sustainable life? Like, what's the point of like leaving stuff for the next generation if there's not going to be a next generation? But I think that this book makes a really interesting point that like it is enough to make these connections, to preserve the land, to like live sustainably for one's own sake, and, you know, for the sake of your own happiness and for the present day. And it's not necessarily all about like the future. I don't know, but
Yeah, I mean, think about what else was going on during this time, right? So this is right before the turn into the 20th century. This is the Gilded Age. Like Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner, I think, co-wrote the book, The Gilded Age, that was skewering these sort of like New York socialites and you know, these are the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, all of these bigwigs. And it's all very much future focused. It's about like accumulating wealth, building the next big thing. Boy, I'm hearing the echoes for now, right? And so a genre that focuses on the kind of day-to-day activities of normal people, and that kind of glorifies a community that is about the present moment, preparing for now, putting aside enough for the next coming season. But you don't see people in Dunnet Landing like, you know, trying to build giant mansions or anything like that, right? There's not really showiness like that. It's a different. I mean, this is the argument that I try to make in my book, that it's modeling a different way to be. A different way of being an American, that being an American doesn't have to be about like the next big thing and bootstrapping your way up to being a billionaire, or I guess millionaire would have been it at the time, and that it is instead about taking care of your neighbor and your community. And for Jewett, this was particularly important to her. She wrote in for the introduction to the second edition of Deephaven. Deephaven was her kind of breakthrough, which was a collection of sketches. Sketch fiction is also considered a precursor to regionalist literature, which are these sort of like village sketches focusing, again, on a particular place. So Deephaven was so popular. That one is about two young women from Boston who travel up to, again, a Maine community on the coast known as Deephaven. That it went into a second edition. She wrote for that introduction that part of the reason, and I'm freestyling here because I don't have it in this book, but part of the reason why she wanted to write about Deephaven and these Maine communities is because she wanted to make country and city cousins less suspicious of each other. there was a huge growing tourism industry to Maine at this point. I think Maine was known as vacation land, America's vacation land in this time period. You had these huge sort of like resorts being built in coastal Maine in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. People would summer there, right? You also see this with like Rhode Island and other places like that. And so the kind of extractive industry of tourism is another one I think we can kind of relate to here in West Virginia, the kind of adventure travelers who come to like jump off the bridge and whitewater raft and all of that. And are seen with suspicion by some of our country neighbors here for understandable reasons. So for Jewett, seeing all of the, Bostonites and New Yorkers, taking the train up or the boat up or whatever they would do to get up to coastal Maine and spending the summer, and then treating the local people as though they were animals in a zoo sometimes. Writing about encounters between urban and rural folk and growing friendships between them was a way of kind of modeling a different way of encountering our others in America, which seemed really pressing to her at the time. Yeah.
I mean, I think that concern of like, I have this stuff where I'm at. I would like the same things here. It's very kind of anti that region, anti-environmental. You're bringing in like, oh, I want to ship the steaks or whatever it is you have.
Yeah.
You want at this place that maybe doesn't lend itself to that space. So there's all of that. I just want to make it like my place, but I'm here.
I think Appalachian author Barbara Kingsolver writes about that in Poisonwood Bible, right? Like the title comes from it's about I don't know if you've read that one, but it's about a missionary family in Africa. It's been decades probably since I've read it, but the poisonwood is a plant that the kind of white pastor father tries to cut down to plant an American-style garden. And the residents of the community are like, don't do that. And of course, he doesn't listen. And then they're all covered in rashes, I believe. And they're like, no, that's a poison wood, right? Trying to replicate, I mean, that's colonialism, trying to replicate what you have in your home country in a new place where the climate, the environment, the people are not suited for that. It's the ultimate hubris. Yeah.
I think too about it's kind of slightly more. I'm not an eco-critic, but that eco-critical bent is kind of this notion that characters that work against a landscape and an environment, those are tragic characters. Characters that find a way to work with a landscape, even with it, they are your comic characters. They get a happy ending because the tragic characters want to fight the land itself and things like that.
Yeah. One of Jewett's most anthologized short stories is called The White Heron.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And that's a really good example, and it's often used as sort of like an environmental or eco-critical reading. And it's about a young girl named Sylvie, and of course the root there, Sylvan, the idea of being associated with the woods and the natural environment, who lives with her grandmother. And then like a hunter ornithologist who comes into their rural area who's hunting this elusive white heron. And he wants to, hunt and kill it and like, mount it and probably bring it to some kind of exhibit.
For scientific purposes.
Yeah, exactly. and he hires Sylvie, who of course has an intimate knowledge of the natural surroundings, to take him to this bird. She knows where the bird is because she's climbed up a lofty pine tree and spotted its nest. And instead of showing, I mean, spoiler alert for this real old story, everybody, but instead of showing the hunter ornithologist where to find the nest, she climbs up and spends the night in the tree and guards the bird against the hunter. And then there's this strange narrative turn at the end of the story where we suddenly get a perspective shift, and it's like we have this omniscient narrator looking down on Sylvie and her grandmother, and kind of pronouncing that she's made a good choice in her environment. We don't get that very often with Jewett. It's really interesting. But I see that impulse in a lot of her writing. Not necessarily preservationist, but about preserving the value to community that those things. Another story of hers, Neighbor's Landmark, that I really like is about these twin pine trees that serve as a landmark for the fishing people. They see them, when they're out to sea. And a guy is like, I could make a lot of money selling these pine trees to this unprincipled timber contractor. But instead he chooses the side of community, and then they throw him a party in his own house, which sounds like a nightmare. Certainly would be for William, who doesn't like seeing people. So, yeah.
So other thoughts about other.
I want to answer Megan's question about the stinky herb, the weird herb, because I think that's an interesting thing to talk about with this book. Harper, do you want to talk about the significance of pennyroyal and the herbs, and potentially the significance of the herb in
Yes.
Mrs. Todd's garden?
So I'm realizing I've never actually said this word aloud.
Abortifacient?
Abortifacient. So pennyroyal, and potentially what the mysterious stinky herb that is referenced, where she so there's a scene. Mrs. Todd sort of runs this herb pharmacy situation. She's an herbalist. She's giving people medicine. And there's mention of people who sort of come by night who get this like stinky medication out the window.
Yep.
And that, as well as pennyroyal, are, I already forgot, thought of as
Abortifacients.
abortifacients. And there is a few scenes in this book, like the sort of nighttime window medication situation, and also the scene during the Chowder chapters where Mrs. Todd takes the narrator to her sainted spot, which is the pennyroyal field, that sort of reference this sort of reference like some abortion narratives. There's at the pennyroyal field, Mrs. Todd tells the story about her late husband, and also this like boyfriend that she had before that. And it's all very veiled. There's a lot of sort of there's not a whole lot of clarity with what she's saying, but a couple people have written about the potential of Mrs. Todd having had an abortion herself with the pennyroyal, potentially because she had a child with her sort of first partner, who they were not able to get married. It was a social class thing, and then she never had. She has a whole thing where she never told her husband about that. That's the thing that she's like, I never told anybody but my mother about this. And I think that it is very, very, like, you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it kind of moments where I think it adds a lot to the sort of like very female community environment, and also sort of some of the non-reproductive aspects of Dunnett's Landing, where like it really isn't necessarily a sustainable place for children, and also like I don't like. Oh, I had something I lost. Also, this book was written at a very, very interesting time for sort of birth control for women. It was, I forget what it was called, but this was, I believe, right about when they were like officially criminalizing contraceptives and birth control.
It's definitely post-Comstock Act, right? Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I think that was like the 1870s. And so this was when women first had to start getting really, really discreet about this stuff. That definitely adds another layer to sort of the figure that is Mrs. Todd, where she really is like a very important figure in the community as an herbalist and also as this resource to women who will be discreet about things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
See, maybe it was just because it was in the beginning, but I definitely thought that this was cannabis that they were discussing, and that's why there were so many chill old people in this town. They were just like, "It's okay."
I don't know enough about the history of cannabis to tell you when it came to the shores of Maine, but that is, I think, the stinky herb that they're talking about here. It's pennyroyal, or another sort of like traditional. I mean, the way that they would have talked about it at the time period is a cure for stopped menses. So to return your menstruation. So
there were post Comstock there because there were a lot of like medicinal ads where it was basically like, oh, like this is a some kind of solve or medicine that will help with these symptoms, and it would just be like all of this. It would be like morning sickness, like stomach ache, cramp, like headache, and it was just like symptoms of
blocked periods.
pregnancy.
Yes. Bloating.
Men didn't know what those were a sign of.
Yeah.
I think there's also when I first read it, in the 90s, there was a Nirvana song called Pennyroyal Tea, which is that is exactly it is about something that has abortive qualities to it.
I like to think that Kurt Cobain was a fan of Sarah Orne Jewett. That's my headcanon right there. So
I think I feel like he would be open. He's about the community. He's about trying to see. He became this big, huge star, but he ultimately thought very small and intimate, and he was very, in his way, very feminist and considering of the perspective of women. And I do think it's hard not to love Mrs. Todd because she's like, I know what another woman goes through. I'm not here to judge. You need it. Here you go.
Yeah.
So
She's a real girl's girl.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went really high right there. And I think it was also interesting that there was the actual medical doctor there, but they seemed to have some sort of agreement of she can help out with a lot of things, and the things that he can't. Like, he's not this new guy that's like, we're gonna bring medicine and civilization to this town. He's like, I've been here a while. I know how it works. I know what she can help with. I can help out with other things too.
Yeah.
So we've got two resources for medical help. Although I think at one point they said the only thing we can't cure is the people who think they're sick all the time or something like that.
I mean, it's still a problem these days.
Yeah.
So. Well, and I mean that kind of you're right. There's not a conflict in this book between like the male medical establishment and the kind of female traditional like midwifery and kind of other healing. But that was absolutely going on at this time period. I wrote a short essay for New Ohio Review about like abortion and knowledge. In two short works, like a couple decades after this point. And this is the time period where we're really starting to see with the Comstock Act and kind of other legislation, a push to center medical knowledge on like male authority and to remove authority from like traditional feminine centered women's knowledge. And so this book, I think, captures a moment in time where we see that kind of traditional women-centered knowledge and the kind of rise of the male medical establishment coexisting in a way that, again, Jewett's a peacemaker. She wants to see these people living side by side and able to work together.
And, I mean, I think ultimately, kind of, it's like the narrator can't stay in this space. The narrator, we like the narrator must leave Dunnet Landing. So, I mean, what do y'all kind of make of the how this book ends, how it stops, how it ceases, how we have a sad, I also think it's very literary. It has a kind of sad bummer ending. It's like Mrs. Todd's like, everything's taken care of. We'll see you.
Yeah.
And is this woman who like confessed some of her most intimate secrets to you in the summer you all shared together. And she's like, okay, yeah. There's no like, let me know when you're back in town or anything like that. So
I think the ending, like talking about Jewett kind of wanting to be a peacemaker and sort of, have, the traditional and the new ways sort of working together. I think that the ending is reflective of that, because, a lot of the time when we're, specifically when I'm looking at this like through sort of an economic lens, a lot of the times it does feel like this is this sort of like beautiful rural utopia, like kind of almost like stuck in time, like very peaceful, everyone's working together society that it's giving us this alternate economic model that we can compare the rest of America to, this socioeconomic situation. But Dunnett's Landing is not a utopia. We see that it is failing, it's dying out. Like, all of the men are dying out because of the maritime industry. It's not sustainable. And the narrator can't stay there. The narrator has to leave because it's a nice place to visit. It's a nice place to vacation to, but it's not something necessarily that can last. And I think that with that ending, it's Jewett isn't presenting Dunnett's Landing as like, this is utopia, this is what like all life should be, like it's so romantic, it's so beautiful, but also she's not being like, well, but that's not real, so we have to suffer in post-industrial America the way we are. But it's sort of asking us to like take some from each and I think put them together. Like, it is good for the narrator to go, and there are other sort of Dunnett's Landing short stories where the narrator does come back, and it's a great return to happiness. Is sort of I'm paraphrasing that, but one of the lines when she returns is that we need to sort of have a balance of these, slow life, community, working together things, but also like we do have to sort of think about the future, think about making a sustainable system. And it is like a very bittersweet, like looking back ending. I don't know, it always kind of gets me.
I feel like it shares characteristics with the like summer camp novel or movie or whatever, where like, wow, you made fast friends and now it's time to say goodbye, right? That scene between the narrator and Mrs. Todd where she says, "I've seen to everything now," in an unusually loud and businesslike voice, and then she looks, she thinks she's turning around and she's like, "No, I can't do it." Like, probably tears coming down her face, right? Like experiencing these emotions. Like, go on, get down to the wharf. I think the emotions of parting here are really familiar. And again, if we think of our narrator as a stand-in for us as we're reading, we too are sorry to leave Dunnet Landing behind and to leave these friends behind. But there's also, I think, Jewett works against herself a little bit here. There's this sense as when I looked back again, the islands and the headland had run together in Dunnet Landing and all its coasts were lost to sight, right? Those are the last lines of the book here. There's this sense that it's frozen in time when you leave it, right? That when the narrator takes her eyes off of Dunnet Landing, when we're no longer present with it, that time stops there. And I don't know that there's any remedy for that for Jewett, except going back and visiting and what's changed? Well, not much, but here's some more stories for you.
We've talked about its cyclical nature. We have also talked about it being a non-reproductive community. And my little headcanon, I like imagining this as like a queer colony. And you don't have to reproduce when there's always going to be more queers coming. You don't have to.
That's right.
So you have like, I guess in my notes, I'm like, is William gay? Because his mom specifically says that he's not very social with the ladies. And I'm like, so is that her trying to like... Yes.
I wrote insert winking emoji there with that. I'll never tell.
Spoilers for another Dunnett's Landing short story, A Dunnet Shepherdess. He does get married to a woman. That doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right.
But he does. He does get married, and it is very sweet.
I feel really fortunate to be able to like read and study Jewett and other women regionalist authors now, because I benefit not only from the sort of like reclamationist feminist criticism of like the 70s, 80s, 90s, but then also the people in the like early 2000s, the past couple of decades, who started to kind of ask interesting and sometimes challenging questions about what these regionalist authors are doing, whether, reclamationist feminist views tend to be like, we should consider Jewett alongside authors like Wharton and Twain and Cather and others that we really laud as being important in American literature, and maybe not being critical as much as we could. Now we can be critical of them, but not only in a negative way. And so there is a lot of kind of broadly conceived queer criticism about Jewett and other regionalist authors. And the Jennifer Ansley, I think, is the one who has the I think it's mainly about Freeman, but the idea is about queer community formation when it is women and it is non-reproductive. Then you have a queer community that is producing producing essentially neighbors and community, and often different types of like goods and services through a different type of network. And so even if William isn't queer, I would say the whole community of Dunnet Landing is pretty queer because it's outside of normative structures. So,
So that leads me to the narrator. I'm like, you could have just stayed and kept learning under Mrs. Todd.
Yeah.
And like when she passes away, you could like, I don't know. In my head, I was like, you didn't have to leave.
Yeah.
What has the city got for you? You can write here. Like,
she's got to get back and meet with the editor of the Atlantic Monthly, I guess, or something.
Because the narrator never mentions like a husband or nothing.
The narrator is not only a stand-in for us, but probably for Jewett too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So Jewett herself lived in Boston and in Maine, and split her time. Moved with the literary circles in Boston, and had her Boston marriage to Annie Fields. And I think, actually, speaking of Nebraska, as you were earlier, I think Melissa Homestead has a book or an article
about Catherine, her
yeah.
lifelong friend and editor and collaborator.
Yes. Yeah. But I think she's also written about Jewett and Annie Fields too. So, so I think there is a non-normative queerness to our narrator too, right? Her production is distinct from what we might imagine. Yeah.
I mean, this is strange. It does feel, having reread it feels very relevant. It's this idea of like, hey, you need to get off you need to get off the capitalist rat race, and you need to find community and connect with people. And there's just a lot of things, and it feels strangely very postmodern to me when I read it now, or post whatever post we're in postmodernism. It feels very kind of fresh and new, oddly enough, having reread it.
Both pre and postmodern
Yes,
in a way,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And that's an interesting question that I want to turn over in my mind a little bit more. In what ways are there characteristics of like realism, naturalism, regionalism that are very much pre-modernism, sharing characteristics with postmodernism and the pushback against modernist ideas?
I mean, I feel like it's a pendulum, right? There was these swings of like realism and non-realism, and of course, I think the realism a reader nowadays wouldn't necessarily feel like this is realistic fiction, but it was something that attempted to equate realism at the time. So that's just whatever's realist becomes unreal, becomes melodramatic after a certain point.
Yeah.
So, any last thoughts or comments? Just to say, also wonderful insights. I really appreciate everybody's insights. Has helped me out a lot in understanding this book. But any final thoughts?
I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to talk about this
Yeah.
book. So thank you. And I mean, I think it's a good opportunity for me to kind of cap out my relationship with Harper while here at Marshall, which is really nice. I mean, I think I will just say, I hope more people pick it up and read it. For one, it's short. And I think it has more to say to today's readers than we might think.
Yeah.
A lot of people are, I think, afraid of, old-fashioned, old literature. And I think you maybe mentioned that the use of dialect in the dialogue and the speaking kind of slows you down as you're reading, which is true and a characteristic of regional literature, and sometimes annoying characteristic of regional literature. But I think that other than that, if you take your time with it, it opens itself up to even a contemporary reader. And I think that it has things to say, and I think we've tried to make that case today, to people who are from this region and might not know anything about Maine. I wore a Michigan themed T-shirt today, the Traverse City Cherry Festival, because that's another place that has been, northern Michigan has been sort of vacationified, and I think that there are many places in the United States that aren't New York or Boston or LA or Chicago that share more in common, like those country and city cousins that Jewett talked about, than they might think.
Harper, do you have thoughts?
Ditto. Yeah, I also just am very, very excited that I got to sort of end my college career by doing this. I've been working in some ways on a project relating to this book for the past, I guess, 5 semesters.
Yeah.
5 semesters,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, I'll just echo a lot of what Dr. Tigg said. Like, I think this book is very accessible. I had my mom read it before our conference, and I think she read it in like 2 days, and she loved it. And there is just a lot of stuff that this is a book that I keep returning to, not just because I constantly have some project going on with it, but also because it is just a book that I think when you read it, it's like a really nice reminder of like, slow down, go outside, get off your phone.
Touch grass, as Jewett would say.
Yeah,
Yes,
touch grass. That's a direct quote.
Yeah.
Smell the
Yeah.
pennyroyal.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yep.
penny
Dig in the
royal.
dirt.
That's her version of it. Yeah.
But also, like,
Dig
and
some
also,
potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
make chowder, which I will probably do soon because I'm thinking about it now. But also just, like, keep trying to foster a relationship with your neighbors and your community and the people around you, because you can't have a Mrs. Todd if you don't go to the countryside for a writing retreat and hang out with all of her old friends. I don't know.
Yeah.
Megan, any concluding thoughts?
It was definitely different than I expected, but also more entertaining than you would expect a book about nothing to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about, like, and this maybe goes into like kind of the standard we think about. A male journey, a male hero's journey is this linear thing, point A to point B, whereas a kind of a woman's journey is this circle, but it is a circle that goes into depth with things. And even though this is a very short book, there's a lot of, it is a book that kind of goes down into its levels and paint and sees the community. And it's a place where our narrator, who is, I guess, is a tourist basically, but spends time there, understands it, is affected and changed, which is what we should all do when we travel. I would say this is a great endorsement to go check out the coast of Maine. And it is I went to Acadia years ago. It's a glorious space, but also, like, I'm sure it annoys people that so many people go to Maine in the summer. I do think it's just the summer in Maine. It's not the winter. We get the summer. We get summer Maine.
Yeah.
So we are getting a bit of a tourist view of these things.
Yeah, I mean, The Winter in Maine would be a completely
Yeah.
different book, I'm sure.
It'd be much more grim.
I will say I
Yellow
kind of got
Jackets.
to have my own narrator of Country of the Pointed Firs experience a few years back. I was in Boston for the American Literature Association conference and got the opportunity to go up to Maine to visit the Maine Women Writers Collection at the University of New England, where I spent several days reading the letters that they had from Jewett and written to Jewett in their collection. And then I also visited Bowdoin College, where she got an honorary degree, and they had some letters from her there as well. And that I, of course, was acutely aware that I was kind of playing the Boston academic coming up to the like I was staying in a literal tiny house on the beach and like going to the clam shack and then going and reading these letters. So I was aware of my own posturing, but also it's really an absolutely beautiful place, and I felt a deeper appreciation for the book once I had been there and experienced it. Yeah, and also here's a fun little thing that I've never done anything with. I mentioned in my introductory comments on Sarah Orne Jewett that she experienced a near fatal carriage accident in 1902, after which she didn't publish again. Maybe not. I found a letter in the collection that was not dated. It had her very shaky post-accident handwriting that was written to her long-suffering typist, Abby Bede, I think was her name. And I found an envelope that was unmatched also in the folder that had a postmark from 1903. So there's a possibility that it referred to a story that she was submitting. So there's the possibility that she may have been writing and submitting things even after her carriage accident. Whether those things were published or not, I'm not sure. So I guess I need another trip to Maine to figure that out.
You must get to the bottom of
Yes,
this.
yeah.
So. Well, thank you very much, Jana, for coming on today. And thank you very much, Harper. And again, congratulations on graduation.
Thank you.
And best wishes where everything about your life takes you. And we wish you nothing but the best. So.
Thank you so much.
And Megan, thank you. Take care too.
I'll be here next
We'll
time.
be here next. She'll be here next time. Yeah. So thank you all very much for listening. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share to HerdCon Podcast.